Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Mad Knitting. Today is October the 5th, 2022. It is Wednesday. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, where I live with my family and where I work and where I really like to make stuff. Today, that is a whole big pile of knitting. I have a lot to talk about because it's been about 3 weeks since the last time I did a video. So let's just jump right into it. It's a really beautiful October day. We're about to get cooler weather coming by the weekend, and it's getting to where we have cooler nights. So if I leave the house early in the morning, I need to have like a hat on. So I thought that I would just go ahead and share what I wore this morning when I took my daughter to school. This is the Agave Hat by Thea Colman, also known as Baby Cocktails. I test knit this when it came out. That was several years ago. I don't even remember how long ago it was. But it's got a really, really fun, let's see if it's showing, cabled pattern. It's made out of worsted weight yarn. I used Barrett Wool Co. worsted, the home worsted yarn. This is a company that is locally owned, is actually owned by Susan B. Anderson and her son. They live in Madison also. And Susan has a company that sells yarn and kits and some other fun things. She is a designer, a very well-known designer of little things. She designs these incredible toys and like little ornaments sometimes. And she's just a really all-around cool person and runs a really great company. So I had this skein of yarn handy, and when the opportunity came to test knit, I knew that this would be perfect, and it really is. I've had it for a few years. There's a little bit of pilling, but not very much. It's very warm. This yarn is very kind to the skin, so if your skin is sensitive, I think this is a wool that you could perhaps have next to your skin. I don't find it itchy at all. The only drawback for me for this particular hat is that because it's worsted weight and there is such a dense cable pattern, it doesn't fit very well under my bike helmet unless I really loosen the strap. I live in Madison. This is a biking town. Sometimes it's kind of obnoxious actually, but I am one of those people who tries to commute by bike year-round when possible. Which means that there are times when I just really have to bundle up to get out there. So having warm woolly options to put over my head and cover my ears is very important. So that's what I'm wearing. I will provide links to as much as I can in the description box below this video. I do use Ravelry, so I will include Ravelry links, but I understand that that is not safe for everyone. So whenever possible, I will include like pattern links or at least designer web pages that are not Ravelry, and I will make that distinction in the text below. So be aware of that. Okay, so today what I have to share, I kind of went on a cast-on binge a couple weeks ago, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I have a really big pile of works in progress. So this is kind of a WIP Roundup video. It's more than I'm usually comfortable having, but I just kind of needed to get some stuff out of my system. So I cast on a whole bunch of things, so I have a whole lot of stuff to share. I do have just a very few things that I finished. I think I'll start with the most basic. So I'm going to start with a hat. This is not anyone's design. It's just something, the kind of thing that I do so I can take it along with me. I've said in previous episodes that one of my go-to take-along projects is to take like leftover sock yarn and size 3 needles and cast on a bunch of stitches and just do like a 1 by 1, so knit 1, purl 1, ribbed beanie, up until I feel like decreasing for the crown. So there's no real pattern here, it's just something I have going a lot. And this particular one, I started this in August on the way to La Crosse, Wisconsin, so that I could participate in this huge bike ride. So if you watched, I forget which episode it was, but I'll probably put it on the bottom of the screen. I talked about that a little bit. It was a big endeavor for me. I was really nervous about it, and I had enough downtime to bring knitting with me. So I needed a lightweight project, something I didn't have to concentrate on or follow a pattern for. So I pulled this yarn out of my stash. It is Leading Men Fiber Arts. That's all I remember about it, and I don't know what happened to the label. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I'm kind of a flake about yarn labels. I'm not very careful about tracking them. So anyway, I know this is Leading Men Fiber Arts, whatever their sock yarn is called, and I don't remember the colorway, but as you can see, it's really cool kind of indigo blue jeans color that alternates with undyed. So for most of the hat, it made this cool stripe pattern. And then when I got to the top and started decreasing, it did some funny pooling. So like there's a big blob of white and a big blob of blue. And the crown kind of turned into this bullseye deal, which is kind of cool. But anyway, I worked on this on the train on the way out to La Crosse. I worked on this in the hotel after I had ridden 100 miles and, you know, had to rest up the rest of the day and then get up very early the next day to finish the ride. So this hat has a little bit of significance for me in that I started it to work on during that weekend. I think I'm going to give it to my son if he wants it. It's a little loose on me, but it fits him really well. And it's just the right length where it's not slouchy and he said he doesn't like to turn up the cuff. He likes to just pull on the hat and be done with it. So if he wants it, this is for him. If he doesn't, I'll just stick it in my giveaway pile for whenever I come up with an opportunity to give somebody a hat, which I have done recently. So that was my first finished object. My second finished object is a pair of socks. Still haven't, oops, that's not it. Those aren't the socks. Here we go. I picked up the wrong bag. Okay, so last time, I still have needles stuck in here. I still have one. I hid the ends and didn't cut them yet, and it's still inside out, but I'll show you the one. So last time I did an episode, I shared that I had surgery, so it's been almost 4 weeks now. I had to get my gallbladder out. That all went very well. I am pretty much all the way recovered. I still have to wait a few days before I'm clear to lift anything heavy. But the day of the surgery, I was incredibly nervous, which I'm sure is very common. So I took my knitting with me to the hospital. We had to be there this absurdly early hour of the morning. And I started the sock, and I didn't get too far before they came in and started putting needles in, and I couldn't really knit comfortably anymore. But at one point, and I forgot to talk about this last time, and I meant to, the anesthesiologist came in, and she could tell I was nervous, and she was talking me through just exactly what was going to happen. And the more details she gave me, the more nervous I got. But at one point, she looked down and she said, "Oh, are you knitting a sock?" And usually when somebody asks you something that specific about your knitting, it's an indication that maybe they're a knitter too, or at least, you know, somehow involved in the fiber arts. And so I said, "Yeah, I'm making a sock. Are you a knitter?" And she said that yes, she was. And she also owns sheep that she raises for wool. So that was so cool. We didn't really have time to talk about it anymore because she had to go do her doctor things, and I had to you know, be a patient. But anyway, it was just sort of humanized the whole experience for me. So that was cool. Anyway, I finished the socks just a few days ago. Do I have a label? I do have a label. So the yarn I used is called Andy Socks. It's by Plymouth. I found it on clearance at the Wisconsin Craft Market about a year ago when they were going out of business and selling off all their stock. So I don't know if this is available, if you can get it easily. A lot of times they would get like stuff that was overstock or clearance or discontinued. So this might have been one of those, but it's got a little bit of alpaca in it. And I think that's going to make these socks really warm. I may also be hand washing them only because I don't think you can treat alpaca to be superwash, or if you can, I don't think it works very well. So I think I'm better off hand washing these, which is fine. I don't mind. I don't typically hand wash socks, but I don't mind doing it. But I'm really happy with how they came out. For these, I cast on 60 stitches because it was a little bit heavier than the sock yarn I'm used to using. So usually I cast on 64. For these, I cast on 60. I did a 2x2 cuff. I kept that ribbing going down the entire front and down the foot because, again, because of the alpaca content, alpaca is not as elastic as wool. It tends to kind of stretch out and stay stretched out. So I wanted to use stitch pattern. I mean, you know, in this case, it's a very simple rib. I wanted to use a stitch pattern that would help the sock hug my foot and not just kind of get stretched out and baggy. So we'll see how well that works. I think they'll be really warm and cozy in the winter, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I like how the stripe sequence came out, and I like that. I think because the stripes are so narrow, there wasn't any funky pooling when I did the heel. So I do a heel flap, I pick up stitches for a gusset, which means that for the heel, you have fewer stitches, so your stripes are going to be thicker. They'll be more spread out on that heel. And then for the gusset, because for a portion of the sock, you have more stitches, the stripes are going to be thinner. And it did turn out that way, but on the whole, I think the sock looks pretty good and pretty consistent. So I'm really happy with how those turned out. And we're gonna get a hard freeze here in a couple of nights, so I may be wearing them soon. I've got a hair in my face. Okay, drink a tea. My last finished object is the most fun. So I'm going to preface this by saying that a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I had the week off, mostly. I still had to work a little bit. The week off to recover from surgery. Moving around was not easy. I spent a lot of time just kind of managing pain, resting up, and knitting a lot and like watching YouTube because I didn't really even have the brain space or the energy to like keep up with a movie or, you know, like a storyline of a TV show. And that week I decided I was going to let myself cast on everything I wanted. I was recovering from surgery. I had some other kind of work stress on my mind, nothing terrible, but just enough that I thought, okay, there are all these things I want to knit, and I was having a little bit of decision paralysis about what to cast on next. So I thought, I'll just cast on everything, and then I'll have a whole variety of things to pick up when I feel like knitting. Now, normally that doesn't work for me very well because if I have too many things, that is overwhelming, but I just decided to go with it. So the main thing I worked on that week were these gnomes. And I showed them partially finished last time. And they are both totally finished now. And I am just pleased as punch with how they've turned out. So the pattern is by Schira. It is called Choose Your Gnome Adventure. And it was the only thing I've done of this kind. It was a mystery knit along where for 4 weeks, every Friday, she released another clue. So first was the hat, second week was the body, third week was the nose and, no, just the beard. And then the last clue was the nose and arm. So she had all these different options for each one. And I had such a hard time deciding on colors that I just decided to make 2 gnomes. So I'm gonna give these to my kids, probably for Christmas. But here they are. So you can see some of the options she presented just kind of in the ones that I've got. So this one, she says to choose 3 colors. For this one, I ended up using 4 because I have a dark gray, a light gray, a yellow, and then I wanted cream for the beard and the nose, and I guess the ends of the hands. I decided not to stuff the hat all the way so that it can kind of bend over, which I find very charming. So this is one of them, and she had different beard options, but I really liked this one where you've got the kind of tassel or fringe, I guess it's fringe situation for the beard. This one I went with slightly simpler options for the body because I didn't want to stripe the body, but then I did a more involved beard because you can see I used 2 different colors for the beard and the fringe. I just wanted a little more contrast since I used such a dark gray for the body. So this was really fun. I was a little bit unsure how I would feel about not only the mystery part, you know, like not knowing what was coming, but also since each clue had these different choices about how much you wanted to incorporate different colors or how patterned you wanted it to be. I just thought, what if this turns out to be like this big mess? But it didn't. I kind of, since you start with the big parts, the hat and then the body, the others are these fun accents that I think it was just a little easier to make up my mind about what I wanted. So for these both, I used yarn I had in my stash. These are left over from other things that I've made. I know it's all worsted weight wool. I know some of it is Knitpicks. The gray for the hat and the yellow are definitely Knitpicks. I'm not sure about the light gray and I'm not sure about the cream. I am pretty sure that the hat, I used Cascade 220 that was left over. And I know that this charcoal gray is left over from a sweater I made about a year ago for my brother. So, and I don't know about the light gray. So some of these yarns I know and some I don't. So the light gray in the body and the nose and beard are the same yarn. So they have that color in common. They're so amusing. They're just fun. I need to find some creative opportunity to get photos, like, because the theme of this gnome or the story that Schira provided is that this is an international gnome of mystery who can wear different disguises, and it's all very fun and playful. So if I can kind of hide them, you know, outside or find a little magnifying glass to use as a prop or something, I think that'd be fun for pictures, but I just haven't taken the time to do that yet. And if I'm going to give them to my kids, I don't want them to see them. My kids are teenagers and are totally too old for this, but they also get a kick out of gnomes. So anyway, that is my finished object. So that is all I have in terms of FOs, in terms of finished objects, but I have loads of cast-ons and other things in progress to show you. And since I did a bunch, I thought, well, let me just do a big roundup of all of it, and that's how I'll do it. So the first thing I want to show you actually is this sweater that is it's been on timeout because I've been too mad at it to look at or do anything. But this is the Epistrophy sweater that has this gorgeous yarn that's so awesome, and this gorgeous colorwork pattern, and just the funkiest ass fit around the shoulders. And I still can't quite, I think what I'm going to do is rip it out and just make a different pattern, but I just haven't been able to bring myself to do that yet. So last time I said I'd probably cast on a Tin Can Knits colorwork pattern, because I love this yarn, this contrast yarn. It's like hand spun, hand dyed. It changes color really gradually and subtly, and it goes so nicely with this cream colored Shetland wool. But there is, I'm such a sucker for Kate Davies patterns, even though this one didn't work out for me. So, by the way, this sweater is from the book Yokes by Kate Davies. I think it's from 2012, so it's from a while ago. I think maybe she's improved her fit, designing for, you know, fit since then. This is the original design. When I checked other projects on Ravelry, I noticed that several, not everybody, but several other people had trouble with the neck and shoulder fitting properly, so it wasn't just me. But she's just come out with this new collection called Sark, S-A-R-K. I can't remember what it means, but it's a Scottish word. She's a scholar and lives, you know, grew up in Scotland and lives there, and has done a lot of research into the history of textiles and the fiber arts in Scotland. And so even if you never knit a pattern from one of her books, they're a wealth of information. So I have many of her books for that reason. Anyway, there's a pattern in there called Horology. You can also buy the pattern individually, but it's one color, so I wouldn't, if I make it out of this Shetland yarn, I wouldn't be using the contrast. I'd have to find something else for this. But Horology is a cardigan that you knit top down, and there's this really cool cable going down the front, you know, on either side of the cardigan opening, and also down the back. And I'm trying to remember if it's on the sleeves too or not. I can't remember. But I have the right amount of yarn for it, and I think it would look beautiful in this cream. And I know that I want this yarn to be a cardigan because it's going to be so, so warm. So that might be what I do. The book has not arrived yet, although I have an e-copy. So I could start that as soon as I work up the nerve to just rip this out. But I haven't quite yet. Because every time I pick it up, like, I look at the color work and I'm reminded of how pretty it is. So anyway, it's not even really a work in progress. It's just an update on that sweater, which I still haven't ripped, but plan to. I have a couple of pairs of socks that are not yet done, but are still, you know, in the running, or in the works. Speaking of indecisiveness, my Felici socks. I mean, ages, like, I really haven't picked these up because I still haven't decided what to do with them. I made this sock. This is Felici from Knitpicks. It's in the color Red Rocks. Very bright, very fun. Not colors I ordinarily wear next to my face, but I would definitely put on my feet. As soon as I finished the first sock and put it on, I realized it was just a touch too small. Like, if I'd added maybe half an inch or so before decreasing for the toe, it would be a perfect fit for my foot. But I really hate ripping out the toe of a sock and reknitting it because it's too short. So even though I was well on my way on the second sock, I stalled out because I can't decide if I should rip it out and make it to fit my foot, or just finish them as is and find somebody with a smaller foot to give them to. I have plenty of socks. I keep making more socks. I don't need to have these, but I really like them. And instead of making up my mind, I just keep going to other projects and casting on more stuff. So that's where I am with those. The socks I'm designing, I mean, I have this first one finished. I've talked about it a lot, so I'm not going to go over it all again. The second one, I've gotten as far as the heel flap, so I'm partly through that. But once I get down to the bottom of that heel flap, I have to be really intentional about like writing down exactly what I'm doing. So one of the things I did, this is an update with these socks, I started a document where I started writing down all the instructions for this pair of socks, like, you know, how many to cast on and what yarn to use and needle size and like the instructions for the cuff. And I've written the instructions for the heel, but once I get to that turn where you go back and forth and do the incomplete rows to make the little flap for the heel to fit into, I should just read some other sock patterns, I think, but I need to make sure that's written very clearly and in a way that I can add in other stitch counts and sizes to it. So I've started, at least. I've started, and I think what I need to do is just make a deadline for myself to finish writing that up, and then maybe finding a tech editor to help clean it up and make it more presentable and start thinking about finding test knitters or something. I think I also need to at least knit another sample in a yarn that you can find. The yarn I used is not commercially available because I bought it ages ago and dyed it myself with food dyes. So I don't even remember the fiber content, if it's all wool or if there's a little bit of nylon, but I really think that if there's a pattern I'm going to put out there, I should at least have used some yarn that you can find easily, or at least a base. I at least need to know what the base is. So I feel like I'm being a little scattered and all over the map with that, but I've got a lot of deadlines and stuff coming at me for work, and so I don't want to put pressure on myself for knitting, but I'm never going to get this thing written up and out there unless I, set deadlines for myself. So I'm going to keep talking about it here because maybe that will prompt me to actually get that done. So next time, I don't promise how far I'll be next time, but I will be further than I am now on writing this pattern. Okay. That is all the stuff that you've seen before. Now it is time for a parade of all the new things I've cast on. And for me, it's a lot. Some people have lots and lots of work in progress. For me, this is a lot. So where shall I start? Okay, last time I had just made a trip to my local yarn shop and purchased yarn to make some sweaters for my nieces, and I have started both of them. So I will share the pattern first. I don't have a very good picture, but I'll show you a little bit of the pattern page, but I'll make sure to insert a photo. It's called Hide and Seek. There we go. It's by Dani Sunshine. And the picture here is not very good, but it's a child sweater that is a little bit of a drop shoulder. It has this cool stripe pattern going up and like two little cables going up the sides, or kind of up the front, and in a similar place up the back, and there are pockets. It's for sport weight yarn. Here's one of the colors I'm using. I'm using Berocco Ultra Wool DK. It's a pretty light DK weight, which is why I thought it would be good for this pattern. I bought this at the Sow's Ear, which is a local shop in Verona that I love. And they actually, I think maybe they're not going to sell this anymore, or these are discontinued colors. Anyway, it was all on a pretty good discount in big bins, and so I pawed through the bins and found some colors that would work. So this is the smaller one. I have two nieces in Virginia that I knit for all the time, and I knit for them partly because I love to knit for them and their parents love to get hand knit things for them. And also in part because they live so far away, I don't get to see them very much, and this is a way I have to kind of try and compensate for that. It's not the same as seeing them, but I can at least, express my auntie love that way. So They are ages 4.5 and 6.5. So when I was looking at sizes for the pattern, I decided to make size 6 and size 8. So the sweaters will probably run big, but I would rather them have some room to grow than already be grown out of them. So this is the size 6, although it's for my younger niece. I am using this dark teal color, which, let me see, I've got another ball of it. It is called Verbena, and it just goes really well with the Breeze, which is this light color. So you use the contrast color for the pockets. It's very cleverly done. I don't want to give away details of construction, but it's very cleverly done. I really love how this cable stands out because of the stripes. So this is all like the knit side of stockinette stitch. So if you didn't have those stripes, the cable would basically get lost in the fabric because it wouldn't stand out enough. There's not like a background of purl stitches or garter stitch. But because you have these stripes as a contrasting color, it's just enough for the cable to stand out. And here, you can see it here. On the front of the sweater, the cable goes along one side of the pocket. So it's pretty cool how it goes together. Let me show you the second one. I had a little bit of trouble picking out colors. I ended up buying an extra ball of yarn just to, I also picked up a red yarn just as an option for contrast. But this is the larger one. You can see this is kind of a, let me see. This one is really pretty. It's a heathery purplish blue called Forget Me Not for the main color. And then there's this pale pink called Elysium, I think like the flower. And I mean, you know, construction and everything, this is the same. It's just a bigger size. So there's just more stitches going around. So I'm just knitting them both at the same time. I just kind of pick one up or pick the other up. It's good for early morning knitting because as long as I'm working on the body, like I'm going in a rhythm, like, you know, I know the pattern. Once I get to the armholes, I'll have to look at the pattern again, but I know what I'm doing, and it's just nice. And this is superwash yarn. I've talked before about what I think about superwash yarn. Mostly, I don't like it. I do use it for socks, usually, and I often use it for baby knits and for kid things. I know that my brother and my sister-in-law are fine with hand washing stuff for their kids, but they have very busy lives, and so when I can help it, if I can help it, I don't put that burden on them for the things that I make for their daughters, because they're little, you know, they're messy. But superwash yarn, it's environmentally not great. You're taking wool, the processes take wool and basically coat them in plastic and use other chemical treatments to keep the yarn from felting if it's washed. So that's not great for the environment. That said, sometimes it really is the best option, especially if you're knitting gifts or for little kids. And this yarn, I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that this Berocco yarn is like environmentally friendly as far as that goes, but it has a really nice feel. So there is a lot of superwash yarn out there that is like kind of ropey and slippery feeling or plasticky feeling. And this really is not. It's nice and soft and not scratchy, but it feels like wool. So that's what I'm using for them. One other thing I wanted to mention with these sweaters is because you have a stripe thing happening, there's the issue of what do you do at the beginning of the round when you're switching colors? How do you avoid that jog that often happens, or that always happens if you don't do anything about it? When you get to the beginning of a round and change colors, the stitches don't quite line up. It looks kind of like this. And when you're working all in one color going in the round, it doesn't show up very well or very much. But when you change colors, it can really, that can be really disruptive to the eye. Some people don't mind it. And there are different ways to address it. And until now, I had not found one that I was particularly happy with. Now on these sweaters, that change of round is under the arm, so it's not going to be in a really obvious place, but this is the sweater I started first. So I'm going to show you what it looks like where I started. I think maybe I ignored, probably for this first one, I ignored, I didn't do anything different. I just changed the color, and you can see that it is a really obvious jog. For the next couple, I tried, and I don't remember exactly how I was doing it, but I think maybe I slipped. So when I was coming to the color change, for the blue, as I came to the end of that last round of blue, I slipped the last couple of stitches and then started with the pink. And that helped with the jog, but it kind of makes a gap here in the fabric because slip stitches are a little looser. And it doesn't, on a little kid, it's not gonna matter if there's a looser stitch on the bottom of the side of their sweater, but it was kind of bugging me, even so. This came up on the gnomes too, and when you're stuffing a toy, you really don't want to have any gap in stitches because you don't want that stuffing to come out. But anyway, I did that a few times, and then I think it was actually when I was working on this one, I finally hit on a method. And I'm sure this has been written down somewhere. It was just, I figured it out when I was messing with it. So I don't know who to attribute it to. I'm sure that I didn't, invent anything. But I came up with it. So what I did for this one, if you look at the top, you can tell that that's the end of the round. You can tell that there's something happening, that it's disrupted. But I feel like at the very least, the stripes line up and you don't have that jog. So it bothers me less. And the way I did it was when I got to the point where I'm starting the lighter color, the very first stitch of that round, I knit with both strands of yarn, both colors. So it's kind of a thick stitch because it's got both yarns. Then I continue in that contrasting color. This stripe happens to be a 2-round stripe. So when I get to the end of that contrast color, the last stitch of the round with this lighter color, I also knit with both strands of yarn. So the very last stitch before I am done with the lighter color, I knit with both strands, and then I just continued on my merry way with the main color. So what happens when you do that is that lighter color almost gets covered up just for those stitches where you've doubled it, but there's not a gap, and the stripe lines up. Even if it's a little bit interrupted, it lines up and it doesn't have that jog. So I'm pretty happy with that. So that's how I'm just going to do it from now on whenever I have stripes or color switches in the round. That is how I'm going to handle it, at least until I find something better. So that's how this is going. These will be Christmas presents. It's only the beginning of October, so pat myself on the back for being so on top of holiday gifts this year. I think they will look adorable in these sweaters. I hope they like them. I hope they wear them. I think the pockets will be fun. They can put little things they find in there, snacks, rocks, whatever. So I'm happy about that. I just wish that there was a adult-sized version of this sweater. The designer, Dani Sunshine, has some patterns where she has a kid's version and an adult version. I didn't find one for this, but it would be really, I mean, I think that would work really well for an adult size. It doesn't look like a juvenile pattern at all. So who knows? Maybe she's coming up with it. Anyway. Okay. Next, I am making some mittens. So this was another thing that I shared last time. I'm looking for, here we go. So, can't find them. Oh, here. Okay. Sorry about that. Had to find my stuff. So, last time I talked about wanting to make mittens for my kids out of yarn that I bought in Iceland. Back in the very end of June through the beginning of July, we were fortunate enough to take a vacation to Iceland. We were gone for 2 weeks. It was fabulous, except for when we all got COVID at the end of it. But anyway, the one souvenir I brought back was yarn from a shop that's right off the ring road. It's like local wool. The woman raises the sheep herself. She has undyed yarn, but the dyed yarn she dyes herself. So I bought a few skeins of it to make mittens for my kids, and I decided to go ahead and get started on those. And last time I talked about wanting to, or having a little dilemma about which pattern to make. And I landed on, at least for my daughter, I have landed on the Triptych Mittens, which I talked about, but just to review, or if you didn't watch the last time. It's from this collection called Mad Color from Tin Can Knits. I love Tin Can Knits. Like Kate Davies, they're one I just kind of keep buying everything they come out with because it's so good. And I have made these mittens before, several years ago. I made a pair of these mittens and I gave them to a friend of mine for her birthday, so I don't have them anymore. But it's just such a cool pattern. You've got this sort of flying geese thing going up the back. I feel like it is not gender specific, so it can, you pick colors somebody likes and you're on your way. And it's really written for sport weight yarn at a fairly tight gauge. The gauge is 26 stitches over 4 inches. This is DK yarn, and each skein, according to the label, is 110 meters. So that's, I don't know, like maybe 120 yards. I don't know exactly. Anyway, I looked at the yardage in the pattern and I looked at the yardage in the skeins, and I was not sure if there was going to be enough. So I decided to start with the smaller mittens. My daughter's hands she would wear the same size as I would on her hands. So I decided to start with those. And I just was sure that there wasn't going to be enough yarn casting on the adult size small. So I actually started by, I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just make a contrast. I'll find a third yarn and make a contrasting cuff. And then I know that I'll have enough for the main part of the mitten and the thumb. And when I held the yarn up next to this Cordale that I used in my failed Epistrophy sweater, let me show you these together. It really picks up like the same orange color. And then this is a natural, it's black, basically, a natural black. So I thought, okay, I will use this Cordale for the cuff and then just use the orange for the rest of it, and that'll be fine. So I cast on, I kept it so I could show you. You're supposed to cast on with a contrasting color. And I cast on the number of stitches it calls for, adult size small on like size 2 needles. And I started knitting, and like, I could tell just a few rows in that it was going to be huge, that these were going to be huge loose mittens, which I wouldn't like. I know my daughter wouldn't like. So I figured, well, because Tin Can Knits makes just about all of their patterns, they have a few things that are like just baby patterns, but almost all of their patterns they have in multiple sizes, from like very small child or newborn baby through very large adult sizes. So I just went down to the child size mitten to follow those cast on numbers for this bigger gauge and crossed my fingers that it would work out. So I didn't even rip this out. I just sort of shoved it in the middle of the skein, set it aside, cast on this mitten, and it's missing the thumb. And I had to add an extra pattern repeat just for the length. But this is what I've got. And I think it looks really cool. I feel like the sun's starting to get lower. We're in fall, so sometimes the sun's really bright and sometimes it's not. So I hope you can see. It looks cool. I feel like it's very Halloween-y. Even though I don't think she's gonna get it till Christmas, but. So the fit is great. It's nice and snug. It is really warm. Like, I'm getting too warm just having this on my hand right now. And I decided, seeing how much was left, I've just eyeballing it. I figured there's probably enough for that second mitten, but I had the brilliant idea of getting out a scale and just weighing everything to see how that was working out. So we have a really sensitive kitchen scale that we use for coffee, because in this household, we are very, very exact about our coffee. We are coffee snobs. We are bougie coffee drinkers. That's a whole thing I'm not going to get into right now. But I thought, okay, let me weigh what I have for this mitten. I know it doesn't have the thumb yet, but the thumb doesn't really add much. And this whole thing weighs about 33 grams. That's with both colors. And I started with 50 gram skeins with both. And then when I weighed what I had left of these skeins, I have 30, let's see, I use more of the black. I had 33 grams left, or maybe 32 grams anyway, just of this. So if what I have for the whole mitten, which includes both colors, weighs the same as what I have left, then I've definitely used less than half of this for this mitten, which means I should be fine. My solution, if I didn't have enough, was just to do the cuff with the orange so that the two mittens would have different color cuffs, but everything else would be the same. But I don't think I'm gonna have to do that. Not for my daughter's mitten. Now my son, I don't know yet if I will use the same pattern or find a different one. But I have the same amount of yarn. These are different colors. This is indigo. It's actually a natural dye. And when I wound it up, my fingers were turning blue just from the yarn passing through my fingers to wind it. So hopefully it won't bleed too much all over the contrast, but this is a natural gray. He wears these colors all the time, so I think it'll look nice. So I won't start these until I'm done with my daughter's, but if I think I won't have enough, I have another yarn that is like this same color exactly that I will use for the cuffs. Which is a little softer. This yarn honestly is a little bit scratchy, which makes it very hard wearing and warm for mittens, but having a less scratchy yarn for the cuff might be kind of nice anyway. So that's what I'll do if I use this same pattern. I also have been kind of looking around to see what other DK weight colorwork mitten patterns there are out there. So I might pick something different for him just for variety's sake, because like I said, I've already made a pair of Triptych already, and doing something different would be fun. So that's the plan. That's the plan for those mittens. Okay, what is left? I have 2 things left. Okay, are you still with me? I hope. Sometimes I worry that I'm boring because I just talk so much about knitting, but I mean, that's what YouTube is for, right? Like, you wouldn't be here if you didn't want to hear about knitting. So anyway, so another thing I didn't have a sweater going for myself. And I wanted to cast on a sweater for myself, and I wanted something like easy, something I could pick up during Zoom meetings, which I have a lot of, something that would be kind of a simple everyday wear kind of thing. So I decided to cast on the Light Ease. This is by Alicia Plummer. And again, I have a, teeny little black and white printed picture, so I'll make sure to insert something in the video so you can have a better look. It's by Alicia Plummer, who I've never met, but I feel like, we're kind of like cyber friends, and I feel like if I could meet her in real life, it would be just a blast. But anyway, it is top down raglan sweater. It's got this nice kind of tall neck if you want, with a little drawstring. You can make it kind of long. It's very comfy. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I did use kind of an unusual yarn. I've had this sitting in stash because I got it on clearance. It's called Bubbly Lace. It's by Berocco. And it is a mix of, this label is kind of in bad shape. Let me see if I can find another one. It's an odd mix of fibers. It is wool, acrylic, and viscose. So it's 42% wool, 35% acrylic, and 23% viscose. But I think it is still hand wash only. Yeah, it says hand wash. So it's kind of an odd mix. It's like, and the color is just a number. There's not a name, but it's kind of burgundy, brownish, purple. And it's not entirely solid, but there's not like striping or variegation. And if you look at what I've gotten so far, it's just kind of a mottled, oh man, I feel like it's really dark on here. But it's just kind of a mottled mix. I mean, these are colors that I love, these dark, I love reds of any shade. This is my favorite red actually, but I love these burgundies and dark reds and kind of wine color. That's my jam. So I think I will wear this a lot when it's done. But it's an interesting yarn because it's like a single ply. It's got these different fibers. It's a single ply, and it is not very elastic or stretchy. So it makes it's not like uncomfortable to knit with. I'm using these wooden needles, but it's not quite as, bouncy and the sort of textile pleasure that you get from like a nice springy 2-ply wool. But it's nice enough. I'm not having trouble with it splitting. I did do like a thorough swatch with 3 different needle sizes and washed it and laid it out to dry to make sure that it wasn't going to change size. And I think because of all that acrylic, it's probably going to hold its shape pretty well. So, oh, here's my swatch. Yeah. Here's my swatch. And the size 5 needle was right on gauge, and that is what I needed for this pattern. And yeah, I'd had this yarn for a while, and I kept thinking I either need to like use this up or, donate it or find somebody else who wants it, because I was just kind of tired of having it sitting there, and feeling guilty that I had all this yarn that I bought on clearance without a real plan for. So I'm glad I'm using it, and it's nice and soft, and I think it'll be a nice basic sweater. If a little bit boring to talk about on a knitting channel, because it's the process. It's interesting, right? It's the sort of the problems and the mechanics of knitting that make this interesting. Speaking of nice, easy, basic knits, my very last work in progress Y'all must be so relieved I'm almost done. I cast on another PokaPoka hat. This is my third one. It's from the book Moon and Turtle. One of these days I'll knit something else out of this book because I love many of the patterns in here. But the PokaPoka hat is just, it's like where it's at. I just really like it. So the idea, and I can show you at least one of the pictures. The idea is that you have a reversible hat. You start in the middle. You start with one yarn in the middle and knit up with a provisional cast on. And when you're done with that, you pick up the rest of the stitches and knit the other half. They recommend like one regular fingering weight yarn and then a mohair blend. So you have like a fuzzy layer. And I picked out a couple yarns from my stash and I got, okay, let me talk about the yarn first. So I started with, of course I don't have labels. This is Knitcircus yarn. It is their sock yarn. It's called Greateast Davies. And you can see it's right in that color family that I love. I don't even remember if I got this on sale or what, but on the label, it's got like one color crossed out and another one written in. So I don't know if they mislabeled it or misdyed it, but it's this gorgeous kettle dyed bunch of reds. And I cast on last Thursday because I had a 2-day conference in person downtown and I had like keynote speeches and panel discussions to sit through. And they were really interesting, but I thought I'm going to be climbing the walls of this place if I don't have something to keep my hands busy. So the first day I went, like I got the provisional cast on all done before I left. And the first day I got like this much of the hat knit. Like I almost finished the main part of knitting the hat. So the next day I thought I have all day again. If I just bring this as it is, it's going to get too long or I'm going to have to figure out how to do the crown decreases and I didn't want to deal with that. So I just left this as it was, unpicked, this is before I left in the morning, unpicked the provisional cast on and got started with the mohair layer, which is, I'm so glad I'm finally knitting with this. This is Republica Unicornia. Kathleen Royston is the dyer. She's based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And she has all these really, really cool names for her yarns. I don't understand all of the references, but some of them are named after My Little Pony characters. I don't remember what this one is, but it's, when I bought it, it's called Cherry Bomb or something like that. And I thought it was red. But when I took a closer look and wound it up, I realized it's mostly not red. You can see how it's kind of striping out in the hat. There is some like really bright red, but there's a lot of this purple color and pink also. But I really love how it goes with the Knitcircus Greateast Davies. There is a contrast because obviously the Knitcircus yarn is darker than this mohair. But I like how they go together, and I think once the hat is done and I've got one end sort of shoved into the other, it's going to look really, really cool. So this isn't for me. This is a gift for someone who has admired my knitting before and actually borrowed the PokaPoka hat, the original one that I made for myself, and commented on how warm it was and how good it felt against her head on that cold day. And so I thought, okay, well, come gift giving time, I think this would be an appropriate one. So it might be a little bit hard to give it up, but that's what I'm doing. So that'll be done soon, just because it's been flying off the needles, because it's such a, you just knit, and then decrease, and then boom, you have a hat. So that is my last work in progress. I've been talking for almost an hour. I was going to share a little bit about what I'm reading, but I think I will save that for next time. I'm just going to wrap this up. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.